Good morning to our guest this morning, Representative Park Jin, newly elected member of the Korean National Assembly. Representative Park, thank you so much for joining us pretty early in the morning and at a time when I know you're very, very busy. I want to say, first of all, congratulations to you on your electoral win and your return to the National Assembly. You, of course, had a distinguished career in the National Assembly, including as chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee during a pretty dramatic time. Well, it's always dramatic in politics in Korea, but pretty dramatic time in U.S.-Korea relations, the passage of the U.S. Korea Free Trade Agreement, and many other contributions to the alliance. Park Jin, of course, I think as everyone tuning in knows, is one of the leading, I think, advocates, analysts, experts, supporters of the U.S.-Korea alliance over the years as it has grown and matured and gone through ups and downs. Of course, is now representing the district of Kangnam-eul, is that right?
That's right, 2nd District in Kangnam.
2nd District in Kangnam. So Representative Park, if you wouldn't mind, I know we'd love to hear a little bit about what it was like to kind of return to politics, the National Assembly, a different party, a different district. What was the campaign like? You may know that our campaign as well, it may have been going for some time, but we'll be getting in earnest here, but especially given the COVID-related restrictions. And as you campaigned, what were the main issues that you found were important to your new constituents?
Well, good morning. It's 9 o'clock a.m. in Seoul, and I'm so excited to talk to you, Ambassador Stevens, online to talk about our common issues of mutual concern. I'm excited to come back to politics after 8 years of private life, teaching in Korean university to young students about Korea's domestic and international challenges and how to prepare for the future world. Back in politics now, I think that we have lots of issues to handle domestically and also internationally, and one of the main issues that I have in mind is, of course, the Korea-U.S. alliance and how to deal with North Korea and China. But for the time being, the pending issue in Korea is how to overcome this coronavirus pandemic and how can Korea restore its economic vitality. Because we are faced with many challenges, the economic problems, unemployment and price rise, and housing issues, and other problems that the government has to solve. Originally, when we were heading towards the election at the beginning of the year, many pollsters predicted that the opposition party, which is my party, United Future Party, will be in a better position vis-a-vis the ruling party because there were political scandals and economic issues, economic problems. And basically, the election was regarded as a kind of midterm assessment on the performance of the Moon Jae-in government, and based on our past experience, the midterm elections tends to come out in favor of the opposition party. But then the coronavirus expansion turned the table around because I think that first people felt the need to rely on the government's efforts to fight with the corona infection, and also people were very seriously concerned about the personal safety of themselves and also their families. So people were expecting that the government can provide effective solution to the coronavirus problem, and I think that perhaps helped the ruling party to get more support from the public compared to the pre-COVID crisis. And Secondly, our party, the opposition United Future Party, trying to emphasize that this election is about the people laying verdict on the mismanagement of the government under President Moon Jae-in. But in fact, what happened is that we were kind of less organized, less united, and less adaptable to the changing political and social environment in Korea, especially in the urban metropolitan areas. We had a very crushing defeat in Seoul, in Gyeonggi province, and also in the metropolitan Incheon area. At the same time, the opposition party failed to attract support from the young voters, voters in their 20s and 30s and 40s, who are very much concerned about the individual life, the safety, and the qualities of life in a very fastly digitalizing Korean society. So that is a big task for the opposition party to reformulate our policy and also our image and our agenda, policy agenda to the Korean people. In terms of the result, the outcome of the electoral performance, the opposition party got 41.5% of the total vote, whereas the ruling party got 49.9% of the overall vote, which is that about 8.4 percentage point a gap in overall vote. But in terms of the congressional seats, there's a kind of a huge gap between the seats that were taken by the ruling party. It's about 177 vis-a-vis the opposition party, which got about 103. So the Korean opposition party is facing an uphill battle now vis-a-vis the enlarged, the ruling party. But I think that in every democracy, we need a very good checks and balances, and also criticism with alternative policy agenda. So I think that we will do our best to maintain sound basis of democracy in Korea. One interesting aspect of the impact of the corona crisis in Korea is that the country, the society are very rapidly moving towards the digitalization. For example, in a political campaign, we used to rely on the traditional method of, say, public speeches and conversation with the people on the street, in apartments or parks. But because of the corona crisis, it was not possible. And instead, the online communication through teleconference, the SNS messaging, and also other means of more technological communication, we called it untact campaign, took place. So I think this is in a way, important aspect of transformation of Korean society into the modern world.
Well, I think South Korea has long had a reputation, rightly so, for being kind of an early adapter. And it is interesting to see in the pandemic and then in the elections, South Korea adopt a lot of things that kind of accelerate the trends, say, of digitalization, of other kind of other work and culture trends that I think the rest of us are now trying to observe and catch up with. So I am certainly in the group that thinks we have quite a bit to learn from Korea. I should have said at the outset, speaking of that, I'm going to try to leave a few minutes at the end, or 5 or 10 minutes for some questions. And for people who know how to use Zoom, which is, I think, everyone on this call, look down at the bottom where there is the Q&A function. If you'll type in your questions there, I'll try not to monopolize all the time. But thank you for that overview. That's very, it's very helpful and very revealing of the kind of situation. I wanted to ask you, I mean, you mentioned that for voters, for your constituents, that economic issues and how those are managed, and overall management is very important. How do prospects look for Korea's economic recovery right now? I mean, certainly the OECD seems to think that Korea will recover faster than other countries, in part because it did get an early start in addressing COVID, although we don't know what the future holds. And from the point of view of the opposition party in the National Assembly, how are you approaching these very aggressive fiscal stimulus programs that the Moon administration is putting forward? You know, the Green New Deal has gotten a lot of attention. Does that have bipartisan support? To what extent is there a big debate about that approach?
Well, the Korean economy is now faced with challenges, including the impacts of the U.S. China trade conflict and also the COVID-19 crisis very much. The prospects of the Korean economy wasn't very optimistic even before the COVID-19 situation. From 2010 to 2019, annual GDP growth of South Korea tumbled from 6.8% to 2.0%. Both internal and external factors contributed to the decrease of economic growth momentum and the expanding household debts and reduction of working population and growing competition from other emerging economies like countries in Southeast Asia. Mainstream economists and commentators also point out that economic policy of the Moon administration, known as income-led growth, is also problematic because it puts the cart before the horse rather than the other way around. Last week, Bank of Korea reported that GDP growth of Korea will go down to minus 0.2% compared to 2019 due to the COVID-19 crisis. The Moon administration is implementing aggressive fiscal quantitative easing, claiming that fiscal expansion is the vaccine and cure for the coronavirus. The ruling Democratic Party of Korea has proposed a huge supplementary budget, almost like $28 billion, larger than the last two supplementary budgets combined. But there are concerns about the government emergency fiscal measures because fiscal stimulus may have a short-term boosting effect, but changes in direction of the Korean economic policy, which is necessary to resolve the fundamental problems with North Korea is necessary. We need to grow as well as spending. The COVID crisis has changed the rules of the game. The government should remove the unnecessary regulations to generate a business-friendly environment, increase the transparency in policy making process, and make policy decisions based on economic rationality instead of political rhetoric or wishful thinking. The Green New Deal, which you asked me, this initiative was proposed by the Moon government, but it needs concrete plans and tangible programs. The Green New Deal must not be used to justify stronger regulation on business. Instead, it should also introduce ambitious deregulation and labor market reforms and industrial restructuring in a digitalizing society rather than just providing economic relief. So I think that the government initiative should be handled with a great care and also with a great caution. And the National Assembly will certainly look into the programs and the plans that will be presented by the government.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm actually going to weave in some questions that are already coming in. Tammy Overby, whom you know well, has a question about following up on what you said about the need for some concrete plans. Does the opposition party have some thoughts about what might be some of the engines of growth for the economy in terms of specific areas where South Korea, this is my part of it now, kind of might be more competitive? It's very difficult in this global economic crisis and for any government, but are there particular areas that you would emphasize as better areas for South Korea to compete in?
Well, obviously, the manufacturing sector in Korea is suffering from the reducing export with regard to our export to China and the United States and other countries. So boosting the competitiveness of the Korean manufacturing industry, I think is very important. And also many small and medium-sized companies having problems with a shortage of fund and a shortage of labor and also problems of technological challenges from outside, from China and other countries. So we need to support these small and medium-sized companies in Korea to sustain their operation. And the third is the impact of the new industry through the fourth industrial revolution. The artificial intelligence and big data and 5G and everything are changing the landscape of the Korean industrial development. We need to train our new experts, our new industrial workers to adapt to the new changing environment brought by this fourth industrial revolution. And I think that it requires a very consistent and very well organized government plan to overcome these challenges altogether.
Mm-hmm. Let's shift now to the U.S. South Korea alliance and relationship, and there's of course a lot to discuss there. And you are one of the leading, as I mentioned earlier, I think experts and supporters of it. But can you just give us a sense in Korea? And are Koreans paying a lot of attention to these SMA negotiations, which have still not been successful in reaching agreement? And do they think of them as just these are kind of normally tough negotiations and they all work out, or is there something different going on here?
I think that the Korean people are watching this negotiation with great interest because it is in a way a barometer of how our alliance works. I think that Korea-US alliance is not just a alliance based on numerical negotiations on our defense spending. It is certainly one of the important aspects of maintaining our military preparedness and combined defense posture. But our alliance is founded upon core values, essential principles of democracy, freedom, rule of law, free markets, and human rights. And these are the core basis of our alliance, which should be protected and safeguarded, whatever happens between the two countries. So I very much hope that this SMA negotiation could come to an agreed solution as soon as possible. I think because the prolongation of this negotiation doesn't help both sides. And personally, I think that we have a better option to implement these negotiations. Right now, we have this annual negotiation method, which means that we need to negotiate over this defense spending annually. And of course, the negotiation always highlights the differences between the two sides. I suggest that we should consider very seriously to revert to the previous method of negotiating it every 5 years so that we can have a continuity and predictability in our relationship and our discussion on this defense spending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a question on a lot of Americans' minds. Actually, there was an op-ed in today's Washington Post co-authored by the chair of the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Asia, Ami Bera, and our good friend Victor Cha. And I actually see in our question section, Ambassador Robert King was writing in to say, the way this has been handled is of great concern to a lot of Americans as well. And I guess that gets me to the other broader question I wanted to get your thoughts on. And that is, and again, I'm asking you to speak about the Korean mood in general, and I'm well aware there's a wide range of view, but is there a sense, would you say, in Korea, and maybe even on your own part, that the Trump administration's foreign policies, and again, I think the SMA negotiations have a particular Trumpian, flavor to them. Are they particular to him, or do Koreans see this as part of a longer term trend in the alliance, or indeed in America's engagement in East Asia and the world?
The America First policy pursued by the Trump administration is affecting the alliance of the US, including Korea. There are concerns that the foreign policy of the Trump administration is more domestically oriented than considering the strategic values of its allies. Every country certainly has the right to pursue its own national interests. So the America First policy is understandable to a certain extent, but it should not be interpreted as isolationism or disregard for the voices of the alliance partners. Korea-US alliance has been built on the foundation of essential values, which I mentioned: freedom, democracy, market economy, rule of law, and human rights. And these are the enduring common goals that sustain our alliance. We need to protect and safeguard these essential values when dealing with North Korea or China. We need to maintain our policy coherence in negotiating with North Korea for its denuclearization. Pressure and dialogue should complement each other in our coordinated and coherent strategic approach to North Korea. Human rights, as well as nuclear issue, should be tackled most seriously by the Korea-US alliance, because it deals with the fundamental nature of the North Korean totalitarian regime. The increasing U.S. China conflict during the COVID-19 crisis has become another source of concern and uncertainty for the U.S. allies, including South Korea. South Korea should upgrade its dialogue with the United States to discuss the political, economic, and military issues related to China in order to solve the problems peacefully and constructively. President Trump's invitation of President Moon Jae-in to the G7 summit, together with the leaders from Australia and India in September, I think is a good idea to pursue our common goals and strategies between Seoul and Washington.
You've actually addressed a couple of questions that people have about the G7, but more broadly, and you've touched on it, how worried are you about this growing U.S.-China tension and rivalry? I understand that Xi Jinping may well make a state visit to Beijing, and that certainly Seoul feels pulled in both directions. Do you have some advice, either for the Moon government or for the U.S. in managing this? Because it looks like we are going to be in a period of really increased tensions between Beijing and Washington, unfortunately.
Well, I think it's very important for us to maintain a good communication and coordination between Seoul and Washington to deal with the challenges that will come up after the corona crisis is over or subdued, and certainly how to deal with China economically, militarily, and politically will be the common issue for the two leaders in Washington and Seoul to discuss in the future, and also in the G7 or G11 summit that is to come. Korea obviously does not want to be caught between the two countries, the United States and China, in terms of its economic conflict or military conflict or political conflict. But I think that the fundamental importance of our Korea-US alliance takes precedence over other issues. And certainly that is the basic position that Korea needs to maintain in our future discussion on the issues related to China.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I have a question from Bob Einhorn, who says, welcome back, Park Jin. And his question for you is, will President Moon believe the ruling party now has a mandate to move forward on inter-Korean relations, despite the stalemate on denuclearization? What's your view? We had that from several people.
The current relationship between two Koreas is uncertain, as North Korea is not showing genuine efforts in denuclearization. Obviously, we should seek peace and security on the Korean Peninsula by improving the South-North relationship. But we have also seen that dialogue for the sake of dialogue doesn't work, and it will only allow time for North Korea to reach its goal to become a de facto nuclear power and decouple South Korea from the United States. The Singapore and Hanoi summits between President Trump and Chairman Kim Jong-un, as well as inter-Korean dialogue between two Koreas, were perfect opportunities for Pyongyang to change its course. But I think that they have wasted these historic opportunities. Therefore, and I think that it's premature for the Moon Jae-in government to retract the May 24 measure of sanctions when North Korea is not showing any signs of positive change. As we know very well, North Korea is still not apologizing for the torpedo attack and the sinking of Korean Navy corvette Cheonan, which killed 46 young Navy soldiers of South Korea in the middle of the night in March 2010. So loosening the sanctions on North Korea, despite the absence of any reciprocal progress in North Korea's attitude, will only isolate South Korea in the international efforts to cope with the North Korean nuclear adventurism. Improvement in North-South relationship is necessary, but it's not sufficient condition. It is more important to keep our policies consistent based on international cooperation with the United Nations and also with our ally, the United States.
Yeah. I want to ask you kind of one last policy question, if you like, and then a political question. I guess overarching this has been us talking about pandemics, and I'm trying to capture some of the many questions we've gotten in from people who have tuned in, and many of who are old friends of yours. My policy question is, you've really given us a great kind of overview of many issues in a short period of time. We haven't touched on Korea-Japan relations. And this, of course, has been very troubling to many of us here in the United States. I mean, what is your policy prescription, either for your own government, for the Moon administration, or for the United States, or for that matter, for Japan, to in this situation?
Right. Well, unfortunately, in the past 3 years, the Korea-Japan relationship has deteriorated due to the various disputes in areas of history, economy, and national security. The comfort women issue and the forced labor issue under Japanese colonial rule, the export control measures taken by the Japanese government, and the suspension of the GSOMIA, the General Security of Military Information Agreement, erupted all together in one basket. Mm-hmm. I think that this multiple conflicts between Korea and Japan is a lose-lose game that are damaging the national interests of both countries. We should find a way out of this unproductive and mutually detrimental stalemate between Japan and Korea. President Moon stated in his March 1st Independence Memorial Address that Japan has been always a good neighbor and proposed that both countries should make efforts to form a future-oriented cooperation. This is exactly what we need. I see some positive signs from Japan too. The Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs recently described Korea as a crucial neighbor in the diplomatic blue book for the first time in 3 years. Important neighbor of Japan. There are multiple reasons for disagreement between Seoul and Tokyo, and Korea-Japan summit is yet to come up on the radar. But both countries should be aware of the fact that none of us will be better off from the ongoing protracted conflict. Japan is Korea's important neighbor, as Japan sees it, which shares essential values of freedom, democracy, market economy, and also maintains a common alliance with the United States as a bona fide supporter of good Korea-Japan relationship. So in the 21st National Assembly, which is only started a few days ago, I will make my efforts to strengthen Korea-US alliance and restore Korea-Japan partnership.
Well, actually, now you've just begun to address what was my last and somewhat political question, and that is, in a National Assembly, which, as you said, is where the ruling party enjoys an historic majority, how do you, where will you put your efforts, and what committees? Do you know what committees you'll be on yet? And I appreciate what you say about foreign policy, and of course, you've always been a leading voice for foreign policy. But what do you see as the initiatives that you're going to spend some time on in this session?
We are in the process of organizing the new National Assembly so that the members can belong to various different committees in the Congress. I may be working for either economic or foreign affairs committee. But the most important thing is that we need to have a sense of direction and also some good strategies to restore mutual trust in Korea-US alliance and also put the Korea-Japan relationship on a right track so that both countries can benefit from the cooperative partnership for the future. So I'm excited to play that role myself once again. After 8 years of private life, I know I have lots of things to do and also many issues that I need to tackle.
Well, it's an extraordinary time. I'm looking at, and congratulations again on your win on being back in public service. I know you do have a lot to contribute, and I see some of the comments are saying we'd like to see you on both of those committees. So, but what I'd like to say is we'd certainly like to have you return to do another conversation with us, perhaps a roundtable, and cover in a little more depth as the Assembly goes on, as this very consequential and crisis-ridden year continues. I think we really would benefit, especially given that some of the constraints we now have in terms of traveling and getting together to do this some more. So I want to thank you very much for your time this morning, for you, starting your day this way. I know it's going to be a long one. I know the life of a Korean politician. And invite you to come back. But any final words you'd like to share with us, I would welcome that now.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Stevens. I'm excited to work with you again for the a better future for both countries, and good luck for the Korea Economic Institute. I look forward to seeing you soon after the coronavirus problem is over.
Yes, we all look forward to that. Thank you, and all the best to you. China, Korea has won much attention. We've been very busy at KEI because of all the attention to South Korea, not so much North Korea, in terms of some of the things you've mentioned of really dealing with a lot of uncertainties and a lot of crisis in and in a way that is very true to its democratic values. And so you've been an inspiration to all of us, and I really look forward to continuing to learn. Thank you.
Thank you.